Well, welcome everyone to the Store Consulting Group and Ox in regards to the retail's booming brick and click, optimizing your retail e-commerce operations. We're going to talk a little bit about what has happened in the e-commerce space today. A lot has happened over the past year. You know, e-commerce has operations have been born or have matured much faster than ever planned, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today, and a lot of bit about some actual opportunity with the Macy's organization. So at this point, I'd like to take just a few minutes and introduce the panel. Charu Thomas, the CEO of Ox, Paul Wyatt, the former Senior Vice President of Operations for Macy's, and then myself, I'm a director with the Stores Consulting Group. So again, welcome today. Charu, if you could introduce yourself, I think that'd be great.
Thank you, Rich. I really appreciate the opportunity. And welcome everybody to our webinar. It's great to see you all today, or I guess virtually see you all. My name is Charu, and I'm the founder of a company called Ox. And at Ox, what we do is we build the tools that retailers need to transform their stores into micro distribution centers. I'm sure everyone here is aware that retail is fundamentally changing, and stores just don't have the tools and processes in place to operate under this new demand structure. So at Ox, what we do is we build the tools that enable that transition to happen. We support some of the biggest enterprises in the world, and we can provide up to 2,600% ROI in 2 weeks, which offers a 1.4-week payback period. So we're super proud of our business results that we can generate through optimized fulfillment. And with that, I'll pass it over to Paul Wyatt.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. I have a heavy background with, obviously with Macy's, and spent really the last 20 years on working on the clicks and bricks side of it, seeing how all that's evolved. And in particular, a heavy focus on the consumer buying habit changes, the use of inventory, placement of inventory, and also the better use of physical locations. So very excited today to cover a number of the use cases with you and some of the experiences that we are seeing. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rich.
Great, thanks, Paul. Thanks, Charu. So myself, I grew up in the retail space. So a lot of what you'll hear from us today, especially from me, will be around the retail sector. I grew up in grocery at 23 years. The most recent job I had there was about 20 years ago. I was the director of workforce management, and I had done that for the last 10 years prior to leaving. I've been consulting now for about 21 years with about 6 years with the Stores Consulting Group. The Stores Consulting Group is a retail consulting group that focuses primarily on grocery and big box and small box retail. So all verticals of retail. We work, and we'll talk a little bit more later on about what we do, but we do work a lot with the e-commerce space and all of the functions and activities within the four walls of a retail environment. So that's a little bit about me, and I think we'll get started now with our presentation. As I mentioned, a lot's happened in the e-commerce space over the past year. We've seen some magnificent growth. I mean, this was growth that was on the books for 5-10 years down the road. Certainly not within a matter of months or weeks in some cases. So we've seen some increased growth. We'll talk a little bit about that. We've seen that the customer needs to be center and front and center on everything that we do from an e-commerce standpoint. Their safety and satisfaction is something that all retailers need to focus on, have been focusing on, and are really moving things forward to increase the amount of return business that we get out of those customers. We're also going to discuss a little bit about what we're seeing and hearing of the retailer's journey in the e-commerce dominance over the past year, and what we anticipate will happen over the next several years as we continue to move forward and continue to mature in this space. We're most excited for that change in the customer behavior, especially with the fact that, we anticipated it was coming. Those retailers that anticipated a little bit ahead of the curve were in a little bit better shape. But there were a lot of other opportunities that folks could grab onto to really move the e-commerce space forward as we move forward. The customers are demanding improved experiences. Paul's going to talk a little bit about what it looked like in March versus what it looks like today, personally, as opposed to, in addition to the retailer's side of things. And then we look forward to the operation, the opportunity ahead to help retailers continue this great e-commerce, their great e-commerce opportunities while improving profitability. What we've seen is we've thrown a lot of things at the e-commerce solutions, but what we've done is we're starting to take a step back and realizing that may not have been the most profitable way of doing things. So a lot of what we'll talk about are the things that retailers are starting to think about, starting to look at the applications, the tools that are out there and available for people to use to help them to become more productive. So we're going to kind of make this interactive as we move through this. I just needed to remember that I was moving the slides forward. We're going to have our first poll. So you should see a poll come up. We need you to describe your role. What is it that you do today? And then describe your vertical, whether it's retail, grocery, warehousing, manufacturing. And then what are the most pressing issues that your business faces. So a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and what kind of things you're looking at as opportunities as we continue with our conversation today. So we'll give you about 20, 30 seconds to fill that in, and then we'll kind of go over the results. We are excited to be able to bring to you not only some of the thoughts of what retailers are doing, but also some of the technology that's out there today, and really starting to make it much more profitable and productive, as well as enjoyable for our customers to be able to experience good customer engagement and better customer service. So again, I'll give it just a second or two. And hopefully everybody can see this. Looks like we've got a heavy concentration on the consultant side, about 57%, a few VPs and directors at 29%, and then a business owner out there. So about 14% of our group that responded is actual business owners. Looks like the retail is taking the top, which is good. That was what it was advertised to be. We got about 57% of the folks are associated with retail, and about 30% of those people are also grocery related as opposed to other verticals. What are your most pressing issues? Looks like increasing accuracy is probably the number one based on this group and those that responded, with increasing capacity and reducing costs coming in second and third. And we'll talk heavily about that increasing capacity. We'll talk a bit about that, as well as the increasing of accuracy. Paul or Charu, any comments in regards to the polling?
No, pretty much in line with what we're hearing. Excellent.
So with that, we'll jump right in. We will have a couple of those polls to kind of make sure that everybody's awake and participating along with us. That makes for a two-way street as opposed to a one-way street, and tries to help everybody out. There's certain aspects of what customers are looking for when they look at the buy online, pick up in store processes of within the e-commerce space. There's been growing pains, of course, throughout this accelerated growth. You probably lived through it. Paul will talk a little bit about that from a personal standpoint, but it is getting better as we continue to grow and as we continue to get more familiar with customer shopping patterns, customer traffic patterns, and we get better and better at the solutions that are involved as well. The winners always put the customer front and center. I mentioned that earlier. I've seen some retailers that are really looking at a true white glove operation, where even the store manager is bringing the product out to the store and ensuring that the customers are extremely ecstatic about the service that they receive. So it goes from one end to the other. I mean, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Retailers are stretched, though. they've continued to grow and really focused on this top 70%, which is not paying, this is what customers are really looking for, not paying shipping fees and the ability to not have to wait for the item to ship. So it's that immediate satisfaction that I need it today, I need it now, I don't need it a week from now when I can get a slot, which happened back in the March and April timeframe. So a little bit about what the customers are looking for. And then we'll talk a little bit about the e-commerce grocery and retail sales. As you can see, I mean, certainly nothing that we didn't expect. From 2019 to 2020, we saw a huge growth. We talked about that in the advertising that we did, about 44% increase in sales, but it's anticipated to continue over the next several years. And it's going to slow, we believe, over the next year to two, and then continue to start picking up as we, again, get much better at what we're doing. And people become familiar and trust that and that's a big word, the trust side of things within the e-commerce and BOPIS space. The online grocery shifted from convenience to essential infrastructure overnight. You can see March was the big jump. It started to decline a little bit as things started to open up again. And then as things started to close down again, it was a roller coaster. We're still on the uptick, great uptick from where we were, even a year ago. And we, as we mentioned on previous slides, we anticipate that'll continue to happen. And in that anticipation, if you look at the headlines out there, you hear it every day. Some of the more recent ones, Hy-Vee stores hired 10,000 employees in the past year to grow their capacity for their aisles online program. Sprouts sees digital sales soar almost 300% in Q4 of 2020. Best Buy seemed to have quite a bit of headlines, especially in the past week. They expect to drive 40% of their total sales through the digital channels that they have available to them. They're reducing space for customers to browse, so that big box Best Buy store that you're used to walking around and looking at things is now going to be about half the size for customers to walk through. And then they're devoting that other half of the store to getting those digital orders out the door in a much more expeditious manner and customer satisfactory manner. Best Buy online sales nearly tripled last quarter. So the things that they're doing and putting in place are working for them. There was an announcement this week that they're about to lay off about 5,000 employees and closing more than 20 big box stores. Their plan is to move those into some of those more consolidated stores. So in Minneapolis, the 4 stores that are in the Minneapolis area around their headquarters, they've made those 50-50 splits in the stores, and they're starting to move people into those as they get deeper into it. The traditional brick and mortar is definitely changing. I mean, it's not going away. People still want to come in the store. I know what we saw at the beginning of the pandemic was, those who were venturing out and using the online ordering services were also going into the store for the things that they didn't trust the shoppers, because they weren't sure that they were going to get the best produce, the best meat selections. So they may have bought the staples online and then went to pick it up. But while they were there, they ran inside and got the perishable items that they didn't really trust that they were going to get the best of the best. Now they're starting to see that the pick is becoming much better, and they're starting to trust that a lot more. And those numbers, as the sales increase, kind of just continue to prove that out. I went the wrong way. Boy. Sorry. Oh, that one didn't want to stay. So this just continues to expand on what we've talked about. Right now in 2020, we're expecting just shy of $1 trillion in e-commerce sales in the retail space. I've seen estimates reach 1.5 trillion annually by 2025. So just 4 years from now, we'll have half again where we are today. So about 1.5 trillion. In July 2020, that was estimated that the U.S. will need an additional billion square feet of storage space, warehouse space by 2025 to meet that demand of $1.5 trillion in sales. Even as the pandemic comes into our rearview mirror, over 30% of retailers are looking to expand their investment in the e-commerce space expand it or start it. We're working with some small retailers who have not had it in the past or have had it and relied on, shopper track or rather different organizations to do the shopping for them rather. And they're starting to look at how do they pick that up themselves. The plan here is to maximize the value of the space and the investment, and we'll talk a little bit more about that to ensure that the profitability increases as we move forward. And we've got, we'll be taking some questions and answers as we go forward, but feel free to throw those questions into the chat if you'd like, and we'll hold those until the end. So our next polling talks a little bit about where you were pre and where you are post COVID in your BOPIS, your buy online and pick up in store, or your e-commerce offerings. So we'll give you about 20, 30 seconds to answer that. And then Ariana will put that up on the screen and we'll have a little conversation around that as well. So pre and post. Currently, where are you at today? It's really amazing to think $1.5 trillion. Sounds like somebody else is looking for $1.9 trillion, but we're going to get that in sales over the next 3 to 4 years. It's amazing. Okay, just another second or two. Okay, it looks like based on the fact that we had quite a few consultants that the results don't surprise me. 5 to 10% was about a quarter of the group, probably our retail person, and that has grown to 0 to, or probably 10 to 20% rather. We missed the one, looks like it's up on the other one. So again, just kind of proving out that what we've seen in increased sales and increased reliability of our customers is continuing in your neck of the woods as well. So with that, I just want to talk a little bit about the trends. We're actually going to listen to Paul. He's going to tell us a little bit about his personal experiences and then quite a bit about the Macy's experiences as they've grown their e-commerce throughout the last several years. So with that, I'll turn it over to Paul.
Sure. We have a couple topics here around obviously the increase in online purchases and what's happening with curbside and the speed of delivery, and concerns about the profitability of e-commerce, the importance, again, the market share. But the behavioral change is really one of the triggers that's the enabler for much of this. If you go back a year ago, I was at FMI and I talked to a number of different companies, and the reference point was for online orders was generally less than 10%. And there was a consideration for modest growth, but no accelerator. Well, come March, all of a sudden, the orders just for toilet paper shifted the entire marketplace. If you remember a year ago, that was the hot commodity, and then commodities as a whole really took off. But that started a trend of adoption that accelerated my estimation and some others, almost a 5-year advancement on the adoption on what are considered difficult transactions in e-commerce. If you want to buy a sweater or a pair of shoes, particularly if they're replacement and you know the size and color you want, placing an order is no big deal. You're getting 1 or 2 items and that's it. But doing grocery store, when it's 25 to 30 items, you have to worry about freshness, produce, trust, as Rich had mentioned earlier, is critically important. I'm fortunate in that my wife was an early adopter this year. She got the toilet paper order in early, and I was very appreciative of it. But it was also interesting watching as we went through the year, particularly with companies like Instacart, and the early learning curve that she was going through, and panic about, was the stuff going to show up? Was it going to be fresh? Was it going to be correct? Was the substitution the right thing? to today, where I don't believe there's any way that people who are shopping like her are going to go back to the old way. All of a sudden, it's a free hour or so a week they pick up. The ease is much better. They can do it while they're riding in a car, traveling, or at a movie theater. They can start their order with Alexis or Siri, and they're able to build out that basket. And what I think will happen on this is I expect the demands will even be more as we come out of this. The expectations for more speed, more convenience are going to continue to increase. And simple things like substitutions will be far more descript, and that the consumer will have an end choice before the final shipment is sent. And we will continue to see what are considered difficult transactions to continue to get simpler and simpler. If somebody had 10 years ago said, hey, you can order a king size mattress and have it delivered to your house without anybody having to have contact with you, and you'll trust it and you'll like the sleeping experience, it would have been hard pressed to get people to believe in that. But when you look at Purple or you look at Casper, or even the bigger purchases that are going on like Tesla, the simplification of the transaction, the ability to fill it quicker and get it to the customer faster is going to continue. So the trend as we go on, Rich, to the next page, is going to be around these key milestones, but there's also going to be the on-site and the off-site. I may want to pick it up in a vacant parking lot or using lockers, but I'm going to want it where I want it. And using platforms like Glimpse to know where my stuff is it going to be there when I expect it? Is it on its way to me? Are going to continue to be pertinent. I will tell you this, I've got over 20 years experience on seeing the clicks take over the bricks. And I've seen commodities and categories that were in that single digit range that now account for more than half, and in some of the categories, more than 70% of all purchases as the customer built out trust and the acceptance of it, particularly some of the return activities. But here's the thing I've never seen. I've never seen a category revert back. And so if it went from 5 to 10 or 10 to 20 or 20 to 30, I never saw it go back. And so I'm going to use produce as an example. Once the trust is built in that I'm going to get fresh vegetables, fresh fruit from a trusted retailer, and I'm going to get fresh seafood, and I'm going to get fresh meat, the trust is there. And as with any experience, if there is disappointment, there is ramifications from that. But most likely is a continued trend higher for that. And as Richard mentioned, and I'll talk a little bit about later on, the value of the real estate for the walk-in customer will continue to get repurposed. The events that happen out of this around how flexible it is, how freeing it is, it's not time bound. You know, if you think about a trip to a store to do your shopping, you're time bound to an hour and a half versus you're doing it on your phone over the course of 3 or 4 days, 2 minutes at a time. You build your basket. You don't have to forget about it. And you don't have to worry about, I forgot to get something while I was in the store and now I have to make a trip all the way back. So a lot of benefits, but I believe the trend is going to continue to accelerate. I do think there'll be a plateauing, as Richard talked about, for, I'll say, fall of 2021 into spring of 2022, because the advancement of all this has moved so quickly with the pandemic. But I expect it will continue to grow. All right, on to the next one. You know, we had talked about a lot of the improvements around because you got to get some of the cost out, and you got to keep improving that experience and reinvesting. And so you are going to see, and you hear more about it today, how do I pick better? How do I get from low double digits? You know, I regularly hear 30 to 60 items per hour, but I also hear in the 180 to 220, depending on how effective the setup is. The efficiency of handling it cold versus the cold needs versus the room temperature needs, where it's placed, and then things like dark stores. So what's the back half doing? Is it a market store? So do you have a slow store that has extra space that can service the full market? Because the big thing that has to happen is you have to take market share out of the entire market. It's not about shifting to e-commerce. It's about holding on to the total market share and expanding it. And so use of space is going to be critical, and it's less dependent on exact location that you may be dealing with right now. And you know, we talk about dark stores, but you also hear about things like ghost kitchens, and I expect there'll be ghost grocery stores and ghost fulfillment centers that may be doing fulfillment for multiple companies. And so there may be a produce center that is filling all produce orders for a marketplace that may be dealing with 6 or 7 different labels of companies. So a variety of pieces going on there. I do expect that the processing costs overall are all going to have to get offset. And, you know, there are beyond just the picking piece, and Rich, if you'll go to the next slide, and the items listed here, there's going to have to be a decrease of mistakes and returns. The labor costs, particularly with some of the wage conversations that are going on now, needs to be addressed so that we can get the productivity up. And all of this is going to require us to offer better service to our customers so that they repeat. A lot of the key components around here are going to require automation, whether it's more advanced self-checkout methodologies, either with the customer using their own device or the standard go through a line and scan everything. But there's going to have to be offsets to these costs unless somebody knows that it's okay to increase your gross margin in a competitive environment, which I haven't seen. And I also think you're going to see some unusual partnerships. One of the considerations is something like on my way. So I'm on my way home. I can make 5 stops on my way home, and a multitude of people reach out, companies, to say, will you deliver these items? And so there'll be some unusual partnerships, because delivering a light switch from a hardware store is not that much different than delivering groceries. And so the ability to go down the same street and make 2 stops more efficiently is going to become more and more prevalent as we go through the next year. All right, and with that, Rich.
Yeah, can I just add a few things there, Paul? Yeah. Just a couple things in that, you know, as we look to get more productive, I mean, one of the things you'll hear from Ox is, as we talk a little bit deeper around that, is that increasing the orders per run. We're seeing a lot of single orders being picked at a time, you know, and as Paul mentioned, trying to get to a more productive state means we're going to have to look outside of the box. How do we get 4, 6, 8 orders at the same time? And how do we make sure and ensure that it's an easy pick? So how do we enable our associates to be able to pick and drop into multiple bins and know where they're going? So I think Charu will talk a little bit more about that. And then the other piece is, you know, to Paul's point, around looking outside of just the e-commerce. There are a lot of activities that we continue to do today in stores because we did them last week, last year, last quarter, last 10 years, last decade. And there's no reason for some of those things, especially in today's day and age. There are other ways to do it. So that's a lot of what you'll hear later on in regards to that process improvement and looking outside of just that area. And then I will say, the communication side of things, both with the customer through things like Glimpse, Flyby, other applications that really alert when they're coming so that we're ready for the customer and we limit their time, to, the ability to be able to communicate that the customer doesn't want somebody to bring it out. They want to go to a customer pickup solution to be able to scan their ID, and then up pops, through robotic technology, up pops their order all in one bin or 5 bins, depending on how much they ordered, but they're able to have control. So it's all about options as well. And then one other piece in regards to that, in that communications, is not just with the customer, but it's also internally. How do we look at, orchestrating the workforce so that we're communicating well with them, we're understanding what tasks they need to be accomplishing to be able to be more productive. So that whole automation of task management is also very critical as we move forward and talk about the ways that we can reduce and become more productive. So thanks for letting me interject there, Paul.
Absolutely, absolutely. Right, and you had covered some of these. There's a lot of challenges around the cost of entry, the hiring of new employees, where's the inventory placement, the out of stock issues, but there have been some successes. The increased sales, the white glove experience. We do expect that there'll be continued need for that cross merchandising and cross sell opportunity at checkout. All right, with that, let me turn it over to Sharu, and you can take us through some of the goals.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Paul, so much for that. And in fact, when you guys were speaking, there was a lot of things that were just popping up. So I think I'll just summarize a lot of the points that you guys already referenced. I think there's a lot of really interesting opportunities that come through this experience. And I think the retailers that will truly win are the ones that will be able to enable that fantastic customer journey from the end-to-end process. So by far the first opportunity is the ability to streamline and optimize BOPIS curbside delivery through profitability and cost effectiveness. So in order to actually make that happen, we need to continue to innovate across that operational network and truly transform every single store into a distribution point. And that's through automation technologies that we've already heard about today, whether that be MFC, dark stores, et cetera, as well as our existing brick and mortar storefronts. If you're using a third-party service like Instacart, which we've already also talked about, it's really important to consider those ramifications for the customer experience, because it's a really scary prospect to give Instacart the customer information. When you get customer PII, personally identifiable information, 2 times, you're exponentially improving the chance that that customer is going to buy from you again. So with Instacart owning that entire channel, you're essentially putting that responsibility in the hands of a third party, and it really decreases your ability to gain that channel back in the future. So obviously that means that we have to think about the operational efficiency post Instacart, right? So what does that world look like? And that relates primarily to the efficiency, staffing, and capacity. So how can we get as many orders out the door as possible? Rich already talked about how you need to be able to batch those orders so you can fulfill more. And retailers who might not be batching orders might be in those 30 to 60 range, like Paul said, but we can really enable them to reach those 150 type pick rates with those basic process improvements through batching and better staffing. I know we also referenced some of the gig economy or additional workforce optimization and task management solutions that we also need to build. And that's both related to in-store staff. So having the right in-store staff to be able to support all that capacity that you have currently, but also have a gig economy workforce that's able to kind of handle those extra jumps in demand as they come up. And I think that that's truly the combination that'll work effectively for the long term. You have that stable, almost like a stable stock in QR inventory policy, but it's with workforce instead. Obviously the last piece of it is the customer experience. I know Paul mentioned some of those challenges that he'd had as a customer on the other end of it. And I've actually heard a lot of challenges from retailers themselves who have had problems with the customer communication and that mobile experience. So you really need to be considering all aspects of that customer journey, because if you can't offer that strong customer experience as measured through a strong Net Promoter Score, you will lose that customer over time. People really do remember good experiences, but they remember bad experiences a lot more, unfortunately. And on the other side of it, if you're able to offer that incredibly strong customer experience, you're able to build those brand evangelists and core supporters that we've already talked about today. And those people will be able to continue to support your brand and what you represent over time. At Ox, what we really do is we build that end-to-end fulfillment technology that's focused on making those retail stores into micro distribution centers. And we're really proud of the business outcomes that we can support. So for one of our customers, we could offer 2,600% ROI over 2 years, which is a 1.4-week payback period. And we support enterprise level customers across the entire fulfillment stack, whether it's orchestration of orders across their entire supply chain network, whether that's stores, distribution centers, MFCs, et cetera. Associate facing technology, workforce management, and automation there as well. Again, this is for that core need of supporting your buy online, pick up in store micro fulfillment strategy. And we're really excited about the opportunity today. So I'll pass it back to Rich to also share a little bit more about the Stores Consulting Group.
Thank you. Yes. So overall, we are a retail consultancy that has been doing this for, well, the company's been involved in place for about 11 years, but a lot of us came from bigger house consultancies. I spent 9 years at Accenture as their global workforce management lead until I came over here, and several other consultancies as well. So, and like I mentioned in my history, I had 23 years in the retail sector. So I grew up in grocery, so I really understand it. A lot of the folks that are with us are the same way. So a lot of what we bring to the party are those tried and true, kind of the basic things, but also the more advanced things. How do we really look at our overall business? How do we assess where we are today and where we should be going in the future and how best to get there? So the whole strategic planning side of things to determine that best path forward. We study the processes really deeply. What is it you're asking people to do today, and is there a better way to do that? Especially as we continue to ask them to do more. As we move people over to the BOPIS side of the house or the e-commerce side where they have to now go and shop, can we give them the processes that help as well as tools and technology? And we look at it from a workforce management standpoint, and the whole how many times do I have to put a machine down while I pick up the product versus having a finger scanner and Ox's glasses that show me exactly where I need to go. The ability for the employee to be able to make it a very simple process. You put that product, here's the product you need, here's what it looks like, it's on a heads-up display. You grab the product, it matches, you scan it, it tells you what bin to put it in, you put it in the bin, off you go, you can do more orders. So it's not only looking at the processes, but also the material handling equipment that you're using. And then from there, where do I put that product once it's picked? Because we spend about 5 to 10 minutes on that last mile. So if we can take some of the time out of the last mile by automating some of the processes, once I pick it, I put it into a facility that the robots automatically sort through scanning of the bins, sort the product and get it prepared and ready for the customers. What's ambient goes what's ambient, what needs refrigeration or freezer goes to each of those locations. And then when the customer alerts us that they're on their way, or we're tracking them from home when they said they're on their way, and we know they're about 3 to 5 minutes out, The robot selects the application, the product for the customer through the application. The customer comes, identifies themselves, and then it's presented. Certainly, you know, kind of looking from just processes that you can handle without investment to also what is an investment that will help you to get to the end game in a much more productive and efficient manner. And then we look at just better scheduling and task management. How do we ensure that we have the right people, the right place at the right time to be able to handle those customer orders? When are those customer orders coming in? There's a trend. People shop relatively close to the same time each week, including e-commerce. They, as Paul mentioned, I might be in my car and I'm putting my order together, but every Tuesday I send that order and I expect it to be ready for me either Tuesday afternoon or Wednesday, which is completely different from where it was back in March, where I know when my local grocer, I said, well, let me try this. You know, my wife was saying, hey, we need to be safer. You need to have it delivered. Well, I'm not one to really miss the opportunity to go into a grocery store because I learn so much every time I do, but we tried it. And in order to find a slot, I was looking a week out to 2 weeks to 3 weeks to sometimes a month out, depending on the time that I was looking. Now, today, it could be as much as 2 hours. You know, I've seen, I actually took a quick job with Instacart to really try and see what was going on. And I delivered to one lady and she says, you know, the last time I did this, it took 2 days. You just got to me in less than an hour. Well, I happened to be in the area when your order came and it worked out. It was, you know, the stars all aligned. But certainly looking at that scheduling and managing of the tasks that we asked them to do. And I talked a little bit about the improved communications, both with the customer, so that especially as we're looking at, hey, we have to make a substitution, do I make the substitution for the customer based on an authorized list, or do I talk to the customer through text? I had one client who said, you know, I asked, well, how do you communicate with the customer? We called them. Well, not in today's day and age, you don't do that, because they're probably working from home. They're probably on a Zoom call right now watching us, and they don't have time to pick up the phone, which then puts a delay in the system, which then costs more to fulfill the order and potentially degrade the customer satisfaction in the success of that order. So texting, instant communications, you know, that's important. So we work with organizations to really improve that. And then that whole workforce effectiveness. What's the best person to have in there at that time, and how do we train them properly to ensure that they're doing the right things to ensure that our customer engagement and satisfaction increases. That return customer is much easier to keep happy and keep coming back than it is to continue to go out and find new customers. So then that whole supply chain evaluation we also look at, and the readiness and technology analysis, road mapping, helping to really understand, is it process, is it technology, is it people, process, or technology? What is the combination that's right for you? So those are some of the other things we do. And then as we talk a lot about vendors, we also keep a good understanding of what's happening in the vendor community for each of those applications. We also help organizations through vendor selections to ensure that they're getting the right product, the right process, and the right technology to be able to be successful. So that's a little bit about us. We do a lot of things inside that four walls. It's more than just the e-commerce space, but all of the things that we do help us to find time, help us to improve processes to ensure that we have the time and the people and the ability to be able to go to from a third party to doing it in-house and being able to handle that volume and that increased volume that we're seeing, as well as the increased volume that could be there if we had the open slots and the ability to have people in the right place at the right time. So that's a little bit about us. Those are the advertisements. Thank you for putting up with the advertisements. And I think we're ready at this point for any questions. So I will ask Ariana, who's been kind of taking those questions in the chat, if you can tell us what those are. And between Paul, Charu, and myself, we'll answer your questions.
Great. One of the questions that came through was, what's the biggest challenge for retailers today from your vantage point?
Paul, you want to take that?
Yeah, I'll start with that. So the pivot, which is I'll say is in process, it's not fully there yet, is pretty significant. if you look at just some very fundamental things of use of space, where do I put stored items that are going to be picked up or shipped? What about my packing stations? What about pickup areas, both inside and outside of the building? What's the relationship with the people who are going to do the delivery? So setting all those logistical pieces up. And then there are other operational changes that are pretty significant. It's change for most of the team, and change is always hard. And it's sometimes simple things like, do I go ahead and merchandise the Cheerios? Do I put them all on the shelf, knowing that 24 out of the 36 are going to get shipped out? So how do I handle that differently so I get as many steps out and as much labor out as I possibly can and help get my shipments ready faster? So it's a real pivot, and I would say that we are partway there. We're not even close to being fully optimized. And I look at a grocery store near me where I can drive by on a Friday afternoon at 4:30 and see 30 or 40 cars queued up for curbside pickup. And until we are well more or better organized than that, I would say we're still in the pivoting move. So.
I agree with that. And then I would just add, we've got a lot of food deserts. We've got a lot of retail deserts out there that need to be supplied. And people are traveling long distances to pick up. How do we get the pickup closer to the need? So as we look at the overall orders, where they're coming from, we can then start to make different decisions. Do we set up a customer pickup system or service within a bank's parking lot and build a small building that's relatively quick and easy to put up, that's fully robotic, that we can just bring the orders in, roll them in, and then everything's taken care of, customers can pick up. So really looking at that, and also the MFC side of things and the dark stores, to Paul's point earlier, how can they support more stores out of a single space? Ariana?
Yeah, we had another question come through. How soon will robotics and automation take over the e-commerce process?
Great question. I personally, I'll start with this one and then kind of pass it on. I think it's becoming, it's still out there a little bit, but there's a lot of testing going on. There's a lot of people that are moving forward. I mean, think about the places you're starting to see lockers. Okay, the lockers there, I get a code on my phone, I go up and it tells me what locker my product in. That's kind of like baby steps as we move to the ability for the robots to be able to pick the orders, in an MFC. Look at Okado, the ability to be able to fully automate that process. They go up until the last mile, and now they've got an agreement with Miramax to be able to say, okay, so now we've gotten this far, let's use your robots to take it the rest of the way, so that from pick to delivery, of a customer order where they pick it up, it's fully robotic. Where is it? It's on its way. It's not that far away. And I believe that we'll be seeing that locally. And we're already starting to see that with the Ocado distribution centers, MFCs. We're already starting to see that in many areas. And that's going to continue as all retailers start, well, not all, but the big ones anyway, start to really continue to move forward in that light.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that, Rich. And it was actually really insightful to hear your comment on it too. I think MFC is a really, really interesting technology. And I think it honestly makes a lot of sense for most retailers to really think about where they are in their automation strategy. So at some level, you have to have the volumes to justify that level of automation. And so it's really important to think about where that automation makes the most sense in the highest volume stores, in the places you need the highest capacity, and really build that hub and spoke network for the for all your brick and mortar stores, especially at the enterprise level. At the SMB and mid-market level, I think the MFC strategy makes more sense if you don't have the capital outlay. So kind of with what Paul was mentioning about cloud stores, cloud MFC services, or almost like 3PLs for MFC, that would make a lot of sense in that area. But to my knowledge, I don't think there has been a business model in that realm, unless AutoStore does something like that, but you guys can correct me on that.
Paul, anything to add there?
No, I think as fast as possible.
Right.
Speaking as a business operations side, please, as fast as possible.
And I think it doesn't have to be the full MFC, fully automated. It may be parts of the system that become automated. So
right.
what can I do to automate the process so that the person, and it's just to enable the people to be more proficient as they walk through the store to be able to pick, sort, and prepare the order. So it might be just parts and pieces of the process that get automated.
I completely
Ariana?
agree.
Yeah, great. So we have another question. What are the main advantages of fulfill from store?
Yeah, I'll start with that. I think there's a couple considerations. If the sales in the marketplace have held whole, but the sales that are physically taking place in the store have been reduced by half, in essence, there's a portion of the square footage that can still service the marketplace that doesn't have to be evident for the customer walking around. So thus the dark store side. And therefore, managing the marketplace from a store side fulfillment can allow a couple things. Direct ship from manufacturer, so bypass distribution centers and take a step out, and not having to do any of the merchandising are really two early ones. The second is you have choices on where to send that merchandise, which you may decide it's lower cost or underutilized real estate or lower cost labor. So it gives you a couple different options that the traditional customer facing retail space doesn't. And all those need to be taken into consideration as you're thinking through your economic model.
And I think Paul hit on options. I mean, customers like options. So, Best Buy, as I mentioned earlier, sees that and says people still want to touch it, feel it, and understand it before they order it, but not everybody. I may know that I want an iPhone 12 and I want this color and I'm ready and willing and able to order it online. But there are others that need the option to be able to go touch it, feel it, see it, and, in a safe manner, but be able to actually showcase it before they buy it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. In fact, the way I'd even describe that is maybe even load balancing of the network, where you can essentially re-optimize how you're routing those orders to effectively address that customer demand. One statistic that pops in my head is it's up to 90% cheaper to fulfill from store than even e-commerce fulfillment centers because of that last mile component. So I think it's a required strategy for retailers moving forward.
And it's more efficient use of the product that they have. I mean, not everything sells all at once. So exactly. It's there, it's available. But to Paul's point earlier, what are some of the efficiencies we can put into the system to also help the profitability as well?
100%.
Ariana?
Yeah, we have one last question. We might have time for one more if anyone wants to ask any more, but we'll go with this one. How do operational optimization tools operate with automation?
Okay. How do operational, can you repeat it one more time?
Yeah. How do operational optimization tools operate with automation? It's a bit of a mouthful.
Yeah, it is.
I think
go ahead. No, please.
Well, I think a really good way to think about it is to think about your strategy from a manual to, I guess the way I would say it is it's kind of a spectrum of manual to fully automated. And there's kind of this bucket in between that's semi-automation. Those are automated pick carts or technology like ours, where you can improve the human output within the process. And so I think it's really important to really consider where that volume is coming from and where that capacity is required before over-optimizing the entire system without necessity, right? So really just understanding where the hubs are for demand and where the spokes really are, and automating effectively in the places that you need it. So, you know, you probably don't need MFC in every store. That's not necessarily the best thing to do. And it might make sense to, for instance, automate the top 20% of stores, for instance. I'm just throwing a number out there, but, and then use semi-automation for the rest of the network. That's how I would think about it.
And I would also interject that, you know, there's a lot of applications vying for the attention of the employee, the customer, and the owners. And all of those need to have a way to communicate. And as they communicate, whether that be through interfacing, you know, through, multiple means, it's what is the best mix for optimization for your organization. And that usually comes from a good assessment of where are you today? Where do you want to be in the future? What's available to you? What's your budget look like? What is your customer look like? And how are you trying to solve for the customer satisfaction answer? And then it becomes a roadmap that says, here's where we are, here's where we want to go. How do we optimize that so that we ensure that we meet all the needs of both the organization and our most important portion, the customer and their satisfaction? Ariana, anything else?
No other questions came through.
Great. Well, thank you very much for the questions. We appreciate it. It always makes it, like I said earlier, that two-way street as opposed to a one-way street. I think this has been extremely exciting for us to put on. We appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak from our experiences as well as answer some of your questions. We have, on the last portion here, it's just who we are and the links. I believe that this information will be provided so that if you have any questions, if there's any opportunities to say, hey, look, we'd like to learn a little bit more or work with you guys to help us understand where we are today, where we want to be in the future, we'd look forward to that. As soon as possible. As Paul mentioned, it's how quickly can we get this done? It's look around. How quickly do you want to be competitive with the guy down the street? How quickly do you want to make sure that, you've put a lot of things into place over the last year? How do I make them productive now? How do I go back and look at the money that I'm spending on those? I've got happy customers. I'm moving everything in the right direction, but how do I make it more productive? And how do I, again, continue to keep my customers satisfied? So again, reach out to any of us. We'd be more than happy to spend some time. If you need, one of us versus all of us, we can pull the others in as well. So again, that's, from the Stores Consulting, from Ox, from Paul Wyatt, we appreciate your time today. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please reach out.